What's up, everybody? Welcome to Hail Yes, a Detroit Free Press podcast about University of Michigan athletics. I'm Tony Garcia, Michigan writer for The Free, joined by Reiner Sabin, our Big Ten insider. It's now been a little more than 12 hours since we last saw one another, Reiner. Saturday, we sat next to each other as we do in our assigned seats at the press box, enjoyed some pregame chicken, mashed potatoes, little green beans. I don't know if I didn't see you have green beans. You might have.
No, I definitely have vegetables. I always have vegetables.
You do? Good for you. I was trying to be healthy as well. And that was all before we watched Michigan cakewalk to its second straight victory. This one 35-7 over UNLV. But again, for the second straight week, they did not cover the spread, Reiner. Reason for concern in Ann Arbor?
I don't think there's much reason for concern. I thought, overall, Michigan played a pretty solid game. So, JJ McCarthy was, spectacular. And they, again, have shown a much more, a much more of a lean towards the pass than they have in the past. And, it seemed like they're going about it a little bit differently. But, again, getting the same similar kind of results, maybe fewer points, but overall produced. But, I mean, again, the defense is playing very solidly. Not allowing much, and the offense is executing during large stretches of the game. So overall, I thought it was a pretty solid performance, and there's not really much you can take away from a game where Michigan is clearly the superior team on the field.
Yeah, and I agree. It was said tongue in cheek about covering the spread. Certainly, I don't think there was anything to see major reason for concern through these first two games. But you just sort of did a good job previewing exactly the route we're going to take with this show. We're going to do our start off with our three things. Talk a little bit about the offense. Of course, another great game from JJ McCarthy. The defense finally getting home with some sacks. I'm sure they're happy about that. And then we will each provide our one sentence takeaway, because this kind of feels like the game 2 months from now will be like, wait, when did Michigan play UNLV? Like, what time was that? Who was around? What was I doing? Even though we were there and very much locked in, and we do have a lot of things we think about now. Once the bulk of the season gets here, it's easy to forget about these non-conference games. And then afterwards, after the break, as you said, points are down this year, but production is still somewhat equivalent. So we break that down and see what to make of it. But before we do anything else, we need to address that right now we are recording shortly before noon on Sunday, September 10th. Last night, or early this morning, USA Today, the flagship publication of the Free Press's parent company, Gannett, released a lengthy report about Michigan State coach Mel Tucker with some accusations against him. And Reiner is our Big Ten insider. He covers both Michigan and Michigan State for us. However, this is a Michigan podcast. We're here to talk about the University of Michigan athletics, specifically football right now. And there will be a time once things are more sorted out to discuss the situation in East Lansing and how, if at all, it relates to Michigan, because that is the lane that we want to stay in here. But right now, all I'm going to do, Reiner, is extend it to you to see if there's anything else that you can or would like to add before we officially turn our attention to the Wolverines. I know you, me, and we're on with our producer and our sports editor, Andrew. We just spent a little bit of time this morning discussing how to handle this.
Well, I mean, again, I think you said it perfectly. Again, this is a Michigan-focused podcast, and I think there'll be a time and a place to discuss that, but that time isn't right now, considering that some things are still up in the air with that. So, I think we should just proceed accordingly and, focus on, the team that this podcast is about.
Right. But we felt that we couldn't act as if or just go on without saying, yes, we're aware that's happening. But that's not what this is for.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it's not germane. Yeah, it's not germane to the topic at hand.
It is not. It is not. And the topic at hand in Michigan football circles, as it has been for 4 years almost, but now there's the real reason for it, is JJ McCarthy. Once again, he was the highest graded offensive player on Michigan for the second week in a row, according to Pro Football Focus, 92.1. Again, 90 is elite. He has graded out as elite twice, Mason Graham graded out as a lead on defense. No one else has done so this season. He was 22 of 25 passing, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. This time he did run. I was wrong. I said I did not think he was going to run once in the non-conference. I thought they wouldn't let him. 3 rushes, 38 yards in absolute total control, Ryder.
Yeah, I mean, it was an impressive performance all the way around. He was fitting the balls into the pockets of quarters coverage, some zone concepts that UNLV was throwing at him. And, he was able to kind of go through his progressions and find the right guy. Check down early on to Blake Corum, that led to a huge gain, to start Michigan off. I mean, all the way through to the, play action pass to Roman Wilson for the 47-yard touchdown. That was another, really good throw. Put Roman Wilson in position to, get a bunch of yards after the catch, hitting him in stride. And so, again, it was a tour de force, as I kind of wrote about, in today's paper, the Sunday paper, and again, a reflection of his growth as a quarterback in this past year, and the confidence Michigan now has in placing faith in him and giving him ownership of the offense, I think.
Week 1, it looked like that was starting to happen, right? But you're always hesitant to lean too much into week 1. Once you do it a second time, then you start to notice that's the beginning of a pattern, right? And again, that happened on the opposite, right? We didn't want to draw too many conclusions about the run game that struggled against an ECU team that loaded the box and sold out to stop it. Well, against UNLV, there were some of those run issues presented their head again, and we're going to get to that in just a second. But I mean, it feels like we could talk about what JJ's doing all day. I think you said it very well. I mean, not only the pass blocking, very good. He had a lot of time to go through his entire progression and get 1, 2, 3, get off his third read, sometimes even check it down, and run with it. But it's also his accuracy downfield, right? And being on the same page as the receivers. So often last year, they were just off, right? Again, Saturday, I should say, 8 for 10 for 179 yards and a touchdown on passes 10 or more air yards downfield. Now, only 2 of those were attempted 20 yards downfield, but still, a lot of these shots, and I'll keep going to it. JJ was 44% on these throws last year, 80% yesterday. I mean, just taking the top off. And those are these big chunk plays when the running game is not getting it this year. The passing game is. And it's hard not to feel good for Roman Wilson, right? I mean, he now 4 catches, 88 receiving yards. That's who I wrote about for this morning. You could just sort of feel it when he was talking yesterday after the game. Just about, I mean, he talked about sneaking out of his house late at night and into Schembechler Hall to work out alone. It's stories you hear, early mornings, late nights, staying after practice. But these aren't just stories. These are minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years that someone actually puts in for Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, there was questions about who would replace Ronnie Bell as that go-to receiver. I think Roman Wilson has clearly answered that. He has a real connection with him, always is able to kind of seems to evade and whoever's guarding him to get open. He's got the speed and the quicks to be able to, operate in space, elude coverage, get off press, find his way into holes. I mean, he's also, again, usually, a sign of a really good receiver is also being able to find openings in the coverage. I think he's able to do that. So, he clearly studies film that comes across in his game. And then, obviously, I think, the big thing with him going forward is, can he stay healthy? That's been an issue the last couple of years. But, assuming that he can, I mean, the sky's the limit really with him, I think, as a receiver, just because, he does seem versatile enough to be able to, again, handle the quick game, but also obviously go deep. I mean, you saw that in the college football playoff game against TCU too. So, I mean, they really haven't taken that many deep shots where they've gone And, that's obviously partially attributed to the coverage that they faced, and, taking what the defense gives you. But whenever that does open it up, I mean, Roman Wilson is also good at that too. So it'll be interesting to see how that connection can further develops, as the season goes on.
And it's a great point you made about him finding separation and finding openings in the defense, right? I think that's one aspect of his game that is underrated and has really grown in my eyes this season. And I think he detailed it well about his 47-yard to touchdown catch from McCarthy in the second half. I went back and watched the play. He actually was behind. He was behind the I don't know if it was a safety or the cornerback, but whichever defensive back was in man coverage, he was just beyond him. And so usually, if you're past them, you extend it upfield. But he then decided to cut it shallow and across, make the defender pivot his hips and change his direction. It created a ton of separation. And he talked about after the game how in live time he's deciding, should I go under like on top of him? Instead, he said he went underneath the nickel. And then made the play. So it's happening in live time, all these things that are growing. And while he does seem to be the number one weapon, I mean, all 5 receiving touchdowns certainly indicate that. Let's not forget about Cornelius Johnson, who had 5 catches for 82 yards and another 26-yard run of his own. I mean, he led the team in all-purpose yards, and he is tied for the team lead in catches, and that's no small thing if teams are going to start focusing on Roman Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to obviously have multiple options in the passing game, and Cornelius Johnson has always been a solid option. He's had his breakout moments, obviously last year against Ohio State. When he caught those two deep passes, and took the top off of the Buckeyes defense. But I mean, again, he's been around the program. This is his 5th year. And he kind of has a savvy and know-how too, just like Roman Wilson does. And, that gives, McCarthy the confidence, that these guys are going to be at the right place at the right time. And also if, they're running option routes or whatever, that they're going to make the right decision based on the coverage that they see. So I think that's, a product of the experience that they have.
It is. And when you have this many years in the offense, though, it has changed and formed. There have been different quarterbacks to get on the same page with. They have an understanding and knowledge of concept of the route tree and the things they're trying to get done on certain plays, right? Exactly. And so we're seeing that all happen. As good as the run game, or as the pass game was, the run game, the numbers decent, but they were decent for Bryant against UNLV as well, right? And I don't think either of us came away saying, oh, those week 1 run concerns, yeah, those are cleaned up.
Yeah, I think there's some issues there, and probably stems somewhat from the blocking of the offensive line. Collectively, they didn't grade out terribly well from Pro Football Focus's interpretation of the game, and and Donovan Edwards didn't play well. I mean, there was a noticeable drop off when he carried the ball as far as production was concerned, and he had a hand in the one series in the second quarter that led to a turnover on downs. I mean, again, Michigan was moving right down the field. Then they decided to feature him, once with pass, twice with handing him the ball, and they couldn't get. They couldn't move the chains there, and then had to call Blake Corum in, and he got stopped for a 1-yard gain, which wasn't good enough to get the first down. And Edwards just has not been able to get going. It kind of shows some of his flaws in his game, where he is good for the big run, but is he consistent enough to be able to get you those yards? And that was kind of the issue last year, even before he had his breakout towards the end of the season when Corum got hurt. And now, it's kind of being, brought to the fore again. these limitations in his game.
He has been less consistent, sort of 5-6 yards than Blake Corum, and more feast or famine. And this year has started out almost exclusively as famine for Donovan Edwards, which is the problem. He's run the ball 12 times in the first half, so 6 carries in week 1, 6 carries in week 2 in the first half of games, 12 rushes for 14 yards total, and it's really hard. And we were asking Mike Hart after the game yesterday, and of course he's going to come to the defense of one of his guys, and he was saying, like, look, like when we watch these plays back, there's not a lot to be had to begin with. However, here's the problem. I don't know that Donovan is getting what is there to be had, right? I mean, I'm starting to wonder if his running style is too much of a one-trick pony. It is too much about just burst once he gets through the line and to that second level. I'm not sure if I've seen the vision. I'm not sure. I mean, he's a big, strong guy. We talked to him in person. I'm not sure I've seen him lower his shoulder. I'm not sure I've seen him show he can cut it back. I've seen him run in a straight line really fast, really far past people.
That was his game last year. Yeah. I mean, he seemed like the definition of a one-cut runner. But here's the thing. He tried to incorporate Corum's game. He wanted to add some wiggle.
That's what
and I've seen him trying to do that in these first 2 games and it hasn't worked well at all because he's not that kind of player. I mean, Corum does. I mean, he can maneuver in tight spaces and then hit his gear quickly. I think with Edwards, he has to kind of get a couple of steps of momentum and then boom, again, the definition of a one-cut runner, where I don't think he can quite accelerate out of the kind of a quick, couple steps and then do it in the same way that Corum does it. But yet he's trying to be Corum, having more of that elusiveness in tight quarters, I guess, so to speak. And so I don't think he's trying to co-opt some of Corum's game. I think he's ended up hurting some of his own game. Do you agree with that? I mean,
he may have. I do see what you're saying. Like, as I replay his runs in my mind, I do see him keeping his feet sort of chopping, but behind the line. I'm not a running backs coach. I don't know what the solution is. There are, I think, and that's probably why Michigan staff is saying this. It's not just one thing, right? The run blocking from the offensive line has not been great. The run blocking from the tight ends has been even less. And as they say in Michigan, I mean, it's a common tight end refrain, certainly in Ann Arbor: no block, no rock. That's sort of how the MO has been. And while Colston Loveland is incredibly talented as a pass catcher, according to Pro Football Focus, on 13 run blocking snaps, he graded out at 47.3. And that is well below average. 50 is below average, and in the 40s is the poor range with air quotes around it. So, if you're tight end, and he is the pass catching tight end. AJ Barner is the tight end who is more run block, who is supposed to be the primary run blocker. He was actually tremendous. He was the best graded run blocker on the team. But as the staff keeps saying, it takes all 11, right? It's just one guy here, one play there, and maybe it's a running back missing a cut. Maybe it's a missed block, but it's not what it was last year. That doesn't take a rocket scientist to see.
Well, that's why they brought in Barner, was to provide some of that run blocking heft that Luke Schoonmaker offered last year. I mean, as far as Loveland, I mean, he has always been kind of a subpar run blocker. He was, basically kind of a big.
It's not the strength of his game, right?
Yeah, he's a big wide receiver, essentially. In some ways that, like a Mark Colston type player, the former Saints, tight end. That at one point was like, should he be a wide receiver? Should he be a tight end? I mean, that's kind of what Loveland was, and or is, I should say. And there was a focus, I think, of his to try to improve the run blocking, put on some more weight and such, but it just hasn't translated yet. And it's going to take time. I mean, it took time for Schoonmaker too. I mean, Schoonmaker's body when he first arrived at Michigan was, he's a pretty, thin kind of player. I mean, you can see that Loveland has made some progress in the weight room. It just, it's going to, it takes more than that to just run block. I mean, it takes technique. And, again, that's why they brought in Barner as a transfer from Indiana this offseason to try to get that aspect of the game and maintain that aspect of the game, because it is important for them to block on the edges.
Yeah. And as the top ranked player in Idaho, I don't think he was being asked to do, a lot of like inline blocking. And so when you go to a new level, there's a learning curve.
That's the problem, though, with, in general with Michigan recruiting tight ends, that they're hard to find nowadays because a lot of high school offenses don't do inline blocking. It's a lot of the spread types, offenses. They're flexed out wide. Nick Eubanks talked about that when he got to Michigan. It was like he had to totally learn inline blocking because he was generally flexed out wide. It's just harder and harder to find those kind of players at the high school level. And
NFL concepts.
Yeah, NFL. Yeah, and just to play that wide tight end position, which is that's a tough thing. I mean, it requires a certain body type and requires the ability.
You're asked to block like a lineman, catch like a wide receiver, and you're not built to do either.
Yeah, right. Necessarily, yeah, and it's especially when you get to the college level. I mean, usually those guys are not fully developed in their frame. So I mean, like, it's going to take some time. It did for Schoonmaker. It did for Nick Eubanks. It's going to be the same for Loveland. Now, Loveland, I think, has more upside than both of those guys as a receiver. So, I mean, Michigan, I think, is more than happy to be patient with him.
Yeah, as they should be. All right. Let's move it over to the defense and with a little more haste, as we always seem to do this. I thought that was a job well done by the defense. If they wanted, like actually wanted, Michigan could have two shutouts right now, right? Like East Carolina field goal as time expired. UNLV, there were 2 minutes and some change left, but no, I don't think anyone on Michigan's too deep was still in at that time. A lot of freshmen. Reese Atterbury, like guys who have moved from offensive line to defensive line, just people you're trying to get reps, right? That is what these games are for. But the pass rush got home after no sacks in week 1, 5 in week 2. That was, I think, the main defensive takeaway, Reiner.
Yeah, I mean, the pass rush getting home was impressive. Also, the fact that a lot of it came from the interior. I mean, and they were using some blitz concepts to free up some of these defensive linemen, to be able to go get some matchups and kind of confuse the opposing offensive line. I mean, it shows the versatility of the defensive scheme where, Jesse Minter is able to kind of, mix and match blitzing to get, pass rush from the usual sources. And that's the case there. I mean, you saw that on the Derek Moore sack where, Quentin Johnson came off the edge and, he was kind of, allowed to just, get on Brumfield and bring him down. And so I think, it was encouraging for them to be able to have that productivity after not getting a sack against East Carolina due to their quick passing game.
Yeah, the communication worked a lot better, and the production came from across the front, and as you said, the interior of the line, right? Kenneth Grant with a sack and a half, Mason Graham, Chris Jenkins got involved. I mean, Derek Moore on the edge, Jalen Harrell on the edge. These are all the names Michigan fans want to hear getting home to the quarterback, right? 10 tackles for loss as well, but it was Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. Two guys who are not NFL eligible after this year. They're only sophomores, so unless they transfer, they're coming back, right? And they were the two most game-wrecking players on Michigan's defense. Kenneth Grant had, I believe, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. He had a batted ball at the line of scrimmage. And then Mason Graham was the highest graded player by PFF in the game. His run defense, 95.5. I mean, just he was all over the field yet again. I mean, arm tackling Brumfield there was one third and short I remember in particular, and it looked like Brumfield was gonna just run right up the middle, and Mason Graham just bear grabs him with his right paw, whatever you want to call it, and just slams him down. Just really, really good stuff from the defensive line. And as they say, I love when the cliches come true, right? Like the greatest improvement is between week 1 and week 2, right? Part of it is the scheme of the opponent they were playing, but also they were playing. They were two times. Kenneth Grant said they had what they called effort sacks. Is that right, Reiner? So I mean, these weren't just we're better than you. Michigan was getting after it.
Yeah, I mean, it's impressive. I've been surprised in some ways that again, it's been Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant that have really stood out more so than Chris Jenkins. I mean, all the buzz getting into the season was about Chris Jenkins, and I mean, again, he was on. Talk about his exploits in the weight room and just, the fact that he was just a dominant player. But I mean, really the player that's, looked far more dominant is Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I mean, they've really been able to actualize, what Minter has wanted from a interior pass rush standpoint, and actually are standing out to the point that again, you can't help but notice their impact on the field. Whereas with Chris Jenkins, it's, I mean, there's many snaps that go by where I don't see him as much doing that. Now, I mean, obviously it's 2 games into the season and, that could change, but I've been most surprised by the fact that we're not talking about Chris Jenkins, but we're talking about Mason Graham and Kenneth Graham.
Right. Mostly because we were ready for Chris Jenkins to also be doing this as well, right? And I mean, Mason and Kenneth Grant have been just so disruptive, so incredibly disruptive through the first 2 weeks. And I think it has to have helped this young secondary. Michigan shouldn't or did not plan on having a young secondary, but Rod Moore was out. Makari Page was out. Will Johnson, yes, he did play 7 snaps late. They tried to sneak him in there. You saw it. That was a good eye, but largely out. And then Amarion Walker, he's new, but they liked what he brought to the room. So as of spring, that could have been 4 of the 5 starters, right? Before Josh Wallace came in at the other starter, or at the other corner spot. Mike Sainristil was the only person who, when they mapped out their starting secondary to us 4 months ago, who started on Saturday. Yet they shut down a passing game that does not really scare anybody.
No, I mean, and again, they didn't. UNLV didn't show that it could really take the top off the defense anyway in its first game, and certainly you saw the limitations of the quarterback. I mean, Brumfield really couldn't do much more than shoot the pass out to a guy in the flat or whatever. But I mean, he really couldn't load up and fire the ball deep. I mean, he definitely seemed like he was limited to the point that he wasn't going to be able to challenge the secondary consistently over the course of the game.
Yeah, and nobody in the secondary really had a chance to stand out like last week because ECU kept getting the ball out so quickly. It was and to the outside. I mean, secondary players were either batting balls down or getting picks or making tackles. It was really all about the defensive line in this one. So I didn't have any DB who really popped to me. Another really nice afternoon from Mike Sainristil. But that was it as far as that side of the ball. So to put a bow on this first segment, Reiner, I would love your 1-sentence takeaway from Michigan week 2.
J.J. McCarthy has a lead role now after playing a supporting role in 2022. If you look at the Nebraska game last year, November, they won by 31 points, but McCarthy only threw for 129 yards, had 8 completions in that game. And afterwards, Jim Harbaugh was asked, why didn't you pass the ball more? And he's like, you can travel by ground, you can travel by air. We chose to travel by ground. Well, now Michigan is traveling by air, and J.J. McCarthy, they feel like he has the ownership of the offense. And it was, again, another, strong performance that will only give them more confidence to let him kind of cook and run this offense.
And that brings me to my sentence, which is the counterpoint to that, the run game is officially something to monitor. Last week, when you and I talked on here and off air, just in our own conversation, I would say, yeah, I mean, we had it documented. You put your concern level, I think, at a 5 out of 10 for the run game when we asked you on here, and I said I was at like a 2. I'm about a 4 now. It has ticked up. The fact that neither running back is getting going and Donovan struggling to this level is very surprising. Blake Corum had 2 carries for more than 10 yards yesterday. That's not getting it done. Against the UNLV team, they gave up 200 yards to Bryant in the FCS when Bryant was lost by 30, right? So they could run even when they were in passing situations. And so I want to see how the line continues to gel. My Drake Nugent had a much better game, even in run blocking at center. I want to see if there's another step from Miles Hinton, if the wide receivers can hold and seal some of those blocks downfield. Because really, if you remember last year, that's a lot of what Michigan talks about. That's how those 7-yard runs becomes 18-yard runs, right? When you're getting a seal on the outside and you can get through that second level. Right now, Michigan's not getting to that second level to begin with. And when they are, the seal's not there. So there are layers of problems in this run game, and I think it's worth keeping an eye on when Michigan kicks off in week 3 against Bowling Green. But this is not the end of us. On the other side of the break, we talked about J.J. McCarthy looking this good, yet I don't know if you'd believe how many fewer points Michigan has scored through the first 2 weeks this year than last year. We compare and contrast it. Does it matter? That's next. You're listening to Hail Yes. All right, welcome back. Reiner, the answer was 20. 20 fewer points per game through 2 weeks for Michigan's offense in 2023 than 2022. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because, I mean, when you're watching the game, you feel, pretty confident in how the offense is running with McCarthy playing at a very high level. Yet, I mean, again, I think it's largely attributed to some of the issues in the running game. I mean, where they're not getting as much out of that. I mean, last year they averaged 265.5 yards in the first 2 games. This year they're averaging 150.5. I mean, 100-yard difference is pretty substantial. Of course, you've seen an uptick in the passing game that's kind of mitigated that drop off from the running game. At the same token, I mean, the running game does kind of keep the offense on schedule. And when you have these inconsistent episodes or unproductive periods in the running game, as you saw in the second quarter with the turnover on downs, as alluded to, where Donovan Edwards was kind of the featured player in that series, you run into issues where, again, drives stall and you're not able to maintain that momentum. So I think that's partially part of it. And also, again, it may just also be the way that things were run last year. I mean, where you had, again, Cade McNamara playing, the first half in one game, and then J.J. McCarthy in the second half, and it flip-flopped in this, the second game where, maybe, McCarthy, when he was in the game, I mean, there was just, obviously a better offensive flow. This year, I mean, they don't have. Once McCarthy's out of the game, I mean, the drop-off is pretty significant, and who's running the offense too.
Right. And also, last year, I mean, that was a quarterback competition, right? So They are trying to run equivalent offenses in both halves to make sure that you're giving all the quarterbacks a chance to put equal tape on, or just have equal tape. So that I think that's one part of it. The other part of it, of course, the clock this year, the way it's continuing to run, it has shortened games. However, last year, Michigan averaged 24 first downs in the first 2 games. They had 48 total. This year, they have 49. So they are moving the ball in as holistic a way, like instead of total yards, in just a consistency of moving the ball. First downs in a game is a pretty good measure of how much you're doing that. And so Michigan is doing it at a relatively similar clip to last year. However, last year, because the focal point of their offense was the run game, when you're trying to run out a clock, that's what you do, right? And so Michigan was just successfully hammering away, even with their backups. So they're scoring a couple touchdowns in the late third, fourth, and then these points keep climbing. Michigan's doing the same thing, but their run game is not as good right now, so they're not scoring. I think it might just be that simple.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Again, especially when JJ McCarthy leaves the field, then all bets are off for the offense, especially as given the fact that the running game has been more of a weakness this year than last year. So, I mean, without a solid quarterback to kind of alleviate that problem, or a spectacular quarterback in McCarthy's instance, I mean, you end up not being as prolific offensively as you were, say, last year.
And now that quarterback spot is even more in question. Jack Tuttle, his Michigan career has spanned one play. It was a nice play. He kept a little zone read, ran it for, I think, 15 yards. But then he was hit late out of bounds, ran into the wall. He did not go back in. Mike Hart said that Jack was he was ready. He was, quote, good to go. And they wanted him to go back, and he wanted to go back in, but Michigan was no. We're just going to take it easy and sort of live to fight another day. So it was yet another week where that backup quarterback role could not even get sorted out. Just for what that's worth. Do you think when Michigan has better competition in 2 weeks that we will, while this might seem counterintuitive, actually see more points because JJ and the offense will be on the field the whole time?
That's a possibility. I'm curious to see if they do resolve some of the run game issues and if it really matters. I mean, Rutgers and Greg Schiano, I mean, always seem to have a pretty decent front seven with active linebackers, and so that's going to be a test. Not just for the running backs, but also JJ McCarthy, and so it'll be interesting to see how good this offense really is right out of the gates with that first game. I mean, I know people like to poo-poo Rutgers, but again, they can create some issues defensively. And, Michigan was in a bit of a dogfight 2 years ago in 2021 against Rutgers in the season opener. A lot of people were like, oh, this team's not going to be that good in 2021. And like coming out of that game, and, they fixed it the very next week against Wisconsin. They went on the road and, beat Wisconsin, by, I think it was 21 points or so. But previously that first week was like, I don't know where this thing is going. And so that this could be another, sneaky test for Michigan right out of the gates.
Yeah. I think Michigan was losing in Piscataway last year. Was it 17-14 at the half? Mm-hmm. And they blitzed them 38-0 in the second half for a 52-17 win. But the point remains, even good Michigan teams there can be a little bit of test that Rutgers can provide. And that's not even talking about the 2020 game, right? When, triple OT. And so that's a few weeks away. Bowling Green is up first. We will preview that later this week. It is a night game. It'll be a 7:30 kick on BTN. Are you excited to see all the new lights and the sound system?
I guess so. I mean, it'll be, it's a strange game for a night game. I mean, they had to, I guess, put something on at night, to use these lights. So I guess Bowling Green was the first option where that became available. But I don't know. I guess that's probably the most exciting thing, maybe as it relates to this matchup. Other than the fact that Scott Loeffler, former Michigan quarterback, is coming back to coach at Michigan Stadium. So that'll be interesting to see. I mean, him coming back, obviously he was a big part of the program during the Lloyd Carr era, and also, Gary Moeller too. So
Yeah, although I would say that is the second most interesting part of this game, or second best part of this game. The first is that it means non-conference season will be over, and then we get to go on to the Big Ten, which we've all been waiting for, and just trying to make it through this non-conference season. Michigan wants to make it through healthy. We want to make it through without our eyes bleeding, because Michigan is just too good for these teams, and it's much more fun to see them tested. And maybe we'll get that in a couple weeks. We don't expect that next week. However, we will talk to Jim Harbaugh on Monday. We will talk to some players on Monday, players Tuesday. It's not clear which coordinators yet Wednesday, but we will come back with our next show Wednesday for a Thursday morning release, looking at the Fighting Falcons. So until then, I almost left without saying thank you to everybody. The show could not happen without executive editor Anjanette Delgado, sports editor Kirkland Crawford, audio engineer Robin Chan, sports editor and producer Andrew Burkle, our editor-in-chief, who runs the entire show, Nicole Avery Nichols. And for Reiner, did we get to Andrew? Did I say Andrew, our sports editor, Andrew Burkle?
You did.
Is he getting 2 things now? Okay. Well, he does 2 things for us. He helps. He does the show with us. I mean, he's listening and watching us right now, and then he does all the editing. So he gets 2 thanks. Thanks to all the listeners, the downloaders. Soon, very soon, I think Reiner, ahead of the Big Ten season, might be a good time for our first mailbag. So we'll get interactive. We'll get some feedback, some questions from you guys, and keep this thing rolling. So thanks for listening to Hail Yes. Until next time.